like our shoes on the golden ground.
Hi, welcome to home. I'm glad you're here. Today I'm joined by Gregor Steinmaurer, a transformational leadership coach, systemic therapist, and founder of Integral Being in Austria. Gregor works with leaders who are highly capable on the surface, yet recognize that success alone does not always create clarity, fulfillment, or ease under pressure. Today, we explore what sits beneath performance, the myth of professionalism, why intelligent people can still find themselves repeating the same patterns, and what leadership looks like when it is rooted not only in strategy, but in self-awareness and emotional maturity. As two people who work alongside a similar clientele, we found ourselves drawn to many of the same questions. Leadership trust does not only come from strategy, communication training, or values. It comes from the leader's nervous system under pressure, their ability to remain clear, direct, accountable, relational, and emotionally regulated. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Gregor Steinmaurer. So welcome, Gregor. I'd like to start by talking about how you work with highly capable leaders. Your experience, what tends to sit underneath the reactions that cannot be controlled?
Yes. So first of all, hi, Kalicho. I'm happy to talk and share here. So I would answer the question slightly different already with the control word. I think we have a faulty premise mostly in our modern world where we think we have to work and function as one coherent, functional, tightly controlled block. But that in itself is like, my understanding doesn't reflect what a human being is like. And therefore, sometimes the idea, and I get that a lot from people, is like, oh, I'm controlled, I'm at work, I'm highly functional, but then these kind of things happen. Why? I said, because you're a human being. And in order to understand what gets in the way of us being in the best way that we can be, we have to understand what are all the different functions we are built and made out of. Some are biological, some are biographical. And what a lot gets in the way when people are saying like something's not right, or they have a question about their behavior or how they feel, the discrepancy maybe of the life that they're living on the outside and how it all looks and appears, and how they sometimes feel at home on their inside, in their quiet back of their mind. Like there's often a big discrepancy. So all these things build into this, what we say, like then doesn't is not just a thing that you need to control more, but to understand more and to get more in touch with. So because all of these things carry important messages, and a lot of it is basically that we all are built of many different habits and patterns and influences and conditions and unintegrated experiences. Sometimes we still carry in ourselves that most of us, if you're a high functioning person, mostly you kind of have control over that, like it works. It's maybe like a bit of a background chronic stress, but it's okay. But when we really have bigger stress or bigger pressure, and we live in a world where we have every day almost like escalating chronic collective and individual stressors, so then these patterns or some patterns become more pronounced, become stronger. And I'm not the same person when I'm relaxed and I'm on holiday or I'm in a chilled mood as the person that I can be or maybe tend to become when there's a lot going on. And when we all know that. So we're not just the one person that should be the same all day long, every day of the year. That's unrealistic and not very humane. So there's patterns that come up, but there's a way to understand them and work with them so that they don't feel like adversaries to what you want, to the way you want to live your life, but become informants of things that actually you need to understand in a deeper way or connect deeper.
Thank you, Gregor. I'm wondering as well, do you think you can elaborate on working from the inside out and matching the inside with the outside, because I think that's a key point that you
Yeah,
raised.
that's absolutely. And again, like you and I, we work with a lot of people that are highly functional, successful. A lot of it goes well for them in their life. You look at the outer portfolio and their profile, it's all like it's amazing. And our world, our modern world specifically, tends to look just to that, to the outer world. And we also try to have control and get the things that we want to have in life by trying to affect the outer world, like a project, a family, people, a company, everything. And then, but that's just half of the world, really. And a big, big part is like our inner world, which to us is often like terra incognita, it's like uncharted territory, because we don't
Mm,
get a lot of that in normal standard education. And so for me, the key that people often get is like, wow, I didn't know there was an inner world, or kind of like had just ideas about it, but I didn't know how to access that. And it's not just like what is often maybe then thought of it like an illogical, emotional, whatever kind of woo-woo world. It's like as deep and profound and to be understood as the outer world or the outer universe. There's an inner universe, and they are in a deep, deep, deep relationship. And what I've seen like so many times is that people, when they're very effective, they have
mm,
mastered a big degree of the work on the outside already. They have expertise, they have professionalism, they have experience. So it's like that is like mostly charted. But what they have not done, or often not done, is like conquer the inner world. And when they start connecting to that, they go like, wow. It's like one of these walls, like a wallpaper wall where there's like a
yeah,
hidden door, and you walked past that wall your entire life, and suddenly somebody goes like, look, here's a door. And you can enter that door, and suddenly you have like your house that you live in doubles or triples or
yeah,
quadruples by the size that you can inhabit. And stuff suddenly that you could not change or understand or affect from the outside, suddenly through different corridors, just to stay
yeah,
with that metaphor, suddenly you can access and you can affect and change. And so that is often like a quantum leap for people. But
mhm.
um, like with anything, we need to learn and to train and to ideally also go with a experienced guide into these worlds, and then it just starts to all make a lot more sense. That's what I lot
Yeah,
get from people when they say, I now suddenly it makes sense.
mhm. Yeah,
And that my past and what I want to do now and how I project into the future, they're not disconnected. This is
mm.
all one intelligent cosmos in a way.
Yeah.
Uh,
Can I
And
bring
yeah,
you can I bring you to that point on, well, it was the education point that made me think the way that we are taught, right? The way that we're taught in
yeah,
education and the way that we learn. And what I would like to talk about is a bit about intellectualization and the mind and the body
mm,
disconnect. And I wonder if you could go into a bit of that, Gregor.
yes, no, absolutely. I think you're pointing right to the to the right crucible here, because again, if you go through Western education, people that have mastered the outer world, you went through that, you mastered that world, and you excelled in that mostly. People are super intelligent and bright and capable. And then they wonder often, like, but why am I still feeling all these other things that shouldn't be there? And then they treat that as a problem or as a pathology or like something that they should just carry somewhere secretly in themselves because nobody should see about that, because
Yeah.
we don't understand well that the world is much wider. And now we know from neuroscience, and it all connects very well with, in a way, what traditions have been saying for millennia as well, that human beings are a interconnected, full experience of brain, or like mind and emotions and body, and even more. And artificial kind of like a separation that we created is artificial, and it worked. It served us historically, and also it can serve us personally sometimes, that we can just disconnect from something and put our focus on something else. But if we make that like a permanent state of living, we just neglect a huge chunk of our reality. It's like you want to say to your body, I don't need my left arm and my right leg. They bother me, they have pain, so like just not focus on that anymore at all. Might be good for a moment if you still want to walk to the doctor, but then you need to tend to it, right? And bring it back in. And so through the understanding, really neuroscience helped us a lot the last 20, 30 years, I would say, to understand that through the nervous system, we can understand we're not just brains, we're not just bodies or something. This is an interconnected, highly intelligent system that brings all these different aspects of us together. The way we think affects our emotions, that affects our body. The way our body is affects our emotions, affects our thinking. And sometimes when people say like, I just want to be very rational about that, that is a noble idea sometimes, but we have to understand or see if that is really possible in a situation. If you're very emotionally affected by something, you need to kind of metabolize that affect. And then it can actually help you to become wiser about the situation. What we often do is like push that like out of the picture, say like, no, it doesn't bother me. But then what you have is like you kind of like limited your wisdom, your intelligence hugely. And it's not just that it's gone, it will kind of like come in through the other side or the back door. It will, and that's the intellectualization. What I think, if I understand what you mean, is often how we try to make sense of our disconnection. And that's sometimes, like in stress moments or crisis moments, that's what these capacities that we have are for, that we can sometimes not pay attention to something because I need to pay attention to how I get through this situation, like the survival mode. That's great. We need that. We don't want to not have that. But we also know we need to know when are we using it and when to not use that.
Yeah. Refreshing, Gregor, to hear you speak of this in this way. I wanted to also tap into this piece about pain. And as a human race, we are pain avoidant generally. So I wonder if we could go into, even if you are comfortable sharing a little bit about, because we know as practitioners that we've had to go through our own journey and we've had
Absolutely.
to go through that pain, and working with the kind of people that we do with transference, countertransference, we have to continue reflecting on that pain. So I wonder if you could share something to this effect that would help people to see why it's worthwhile to
Yes.
go through that avoidance of pain.
Yeah. Well, that's a big question, but a beautiful one. And I think you already said it. Like, for example, in our profession, if we want to support people to develop, to grow, to heal, to flourish, to integrate, whatever word we want to use, but just to support people to become their fuller, more natural, more relaxed, more wise version and self. So any of this I can only do that. I can only guide somebody through the territory if I have walked through the territory myself. And the human suffering, which pain is an element of, is an unavoidable reality and part of life. And the problem is, if we have not learned or got the training and the support, or maybe even the very other conditioning to not go there, then it actually starts to become like the enemy. And then it's like what you said, like we have also a biological tendency to not go to pain and seek the pleasure. But that then it creates side effects. It has, it stores up, and then it comes in other ways. It starts to show us like emotional pain, for example. If it's not addressed, it starts to either become physical pain at one point. A lot of people experience that. It goes to other channels. It wants to kind of like it wants to be seen. And the beauty of pain, if we embrace it, in my understanding, which like any suffering does, it opens your heart to the real suffering of other people. I mean, everybody who went through loss, and that's at one point everybody in life, meeting death as a reality of life, but all the other tiny or big losses that we all experience, naturally going through life. So if you have allowed that to touch you, you will feel more empathy for somebody else going through that process, and you can become a supportive presence and help for them. If you have not done that, you will just project your own tendencies of not wanting to feel that onto the other, and then we're very helping, like trying to fix it, everything, say good words, or like, now come on, like need to go on forever, just go back to look about the future. All these kind of like intendedly good kind of like sayings, but they're actually most of the time don't help. They don't really help. So I myself, like I needed to, and still need to look at the places in myself. And just one, I would say it's not just pain, because even pain, because some people actually are very comfortable with pain. They're maybe even too comfortable with pain because that's so familiar. Then they seek out the pain in a specific way, and they avoid something else which is more unfamiliar or like contrary to their pattern and what they felt as like their identity of how I do things. So it's often a little bit more subtle. Like you need to look with the individual, what is that you avoid and what you're protecting by that, and what is it actually that would be your stretch. Because a lot of executives, they go through they endure pain so bravely, and I go like, wow, the harshness through which they put themselves through, an amount of hours and pressures and work schedules. I go like, wow, that's brutal, And then people say like, yeah, I'm okay with the pain. Yes, but maybe you're not okay with something else, or you're protecting a certain maybe even identity and belief, but you don't know what, as long as you don't know what you don't know what you're avoiding, or what potentials of life you're also missing. And most of the time it shows in relationships then, in personal lives, in families, with kids, big time. What you start to not look at, life tends to bring in gracefully, but also kind of relentlessly, because you can't cheat yourself out of this game. Life tries to bring it in somewhere. It says like, hello, something going on. And it breaks my heart a lot of times. A lot of times I hear stories about kids going through, also in the world that we're in, going through very hard times. And sometimes there's really a call also for the parents and the way they conduct their lives, the way they maybe have neglected parts of themselves in their inner world. Then suddenly the kids start to display. And when the parents turn to that in a new way, like doesn't need to be big or dramatic, but just like signaling that sometimes the kids even suddenly symptoms disappear or change. And that's really, it can be heartbreaking and very uplifting to feel like, wow, we didn't pass on the burden to the next generation, but actually helped them.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. As you're saying that, I'm thinking of so many situations in the work that I've done as well, where it is heartbreaking, but so many people, when they come into this work and they realize, and they have that realization, it is, like you say, rewarding to
Yes.
see.
And it
I,
can, it's so beautiful to see that suddenly people feel like, oh, I actually can do something about this. I'm not just like, I have to just live with that unexplored part in myself, or live through the pain that my children go through. I can do something about this, and
Yeah.
people want to do something, and people are so eager to want to do, but they sometimes lack the tools or the orientation, or even just the knowledge that there is something that can be done, and it can
Mm.
be.
Yeah, absolutely. What about those executives, entrepreneurs, and people who are working towards providing massively for their family structure? And so they focus on providing, but they can see that the children are not happy, or they're not spending enough time with one of the parents.
Mm.
What about in these cases? What have you found there?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I would call, like, goes a bit to the pattern or the identity of being the provider, the one that makes everybody happy, like that sacrifices self for the happiness of others. And that's a very, like, this, the word sacrifice is an interesting one, like it has
Yeah.
a lot of different connotations. And I get that a lot from parents, like as executives, but just parents in generally. If you have kids, there is a lot of sacrifice that you need
Mm.
to go through. And
Yeah.
part of that is very healthy. But if that is part of an identity, or what we would call, like you're in a subtle way trying to feel good about yourself by not thinking about yourself.
Mhm.
Sometimes these things are very paradoxical,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
seemingly. um, then it actually is not so much like really helping the other, but it comes in the disguise of like, oh, I'm all out there for you. I'm just giving you everything. I'm doing just the job, just that I can provide to you.
Yeah.
And some of that might be true, and some of that is also maybe not so true. And kids
Mhm.
will pick
Mhm.
that up. And kids don't actually, in my understanding and an experience with, like, working with so many people, and my own, they don't need us to sacrifice our lives for them,
Mhm.
because what kids do is they learn from the model.
Yeah.
And so either they just like totally copy the model, so you get kids who do the same, or they
Yeah.
will at one point say like, wait a moment, like, what actually? So they will question maybe that mode of like total self-sacrifice. And I'm not saying about being not self-centered all the time and being really there for what they need, but the hidden self-centeredness of like, I'm sacrificing everything for you, I'm neglecting all my needs, I'm working very hard, but in return I kind of expect my kids to be grateful about that.
Mm.
But that leaves them with quite a burden sometimes, that they feel, so what's the model of life that I'm getting? And maybe that fits to them, but sometimes not. And
Yeah.
then the kids feel that like the happiness of a person is a huge, or maybe the biggest gift you can give to your children. A friend of mine, an educator for parents, said at one point, kids have many needs. You can spell them out, but one of the one that maybe is not so much spoken about is also the kids have a need that the parents enjoy their own lives and feel good in themselves, because
Absolutely.
then
Yeah.
I can really be a model and I can be there. And frankly, it's very simple often what kids need. And
Yeah.
mostly it's not, I mean, it's good to have material security and then providing, but time is a very scarce resource. And
Mhm.
kids need attention and time. And not only just the quantity, but the quality of presence of the time that you're with. And also, with executives, I feel that a lot, like the parents, or the father, can be the mother, it's more an
Mm.
archetype. They can feel so powerful, so extremely resourceful, so
Yeah.
like, invincible, like this super figure, that they feel like I can't reach that person. I can never get close to that. I can never be somebody like that. So learning when you're an executive, when you come home and you meet your kids, that goes again to the fullness of like being a human being. Can you shift your identity? Can you shift your inner way of being, not from being so driven and still thinking about all the 10,000 projects, but to really be with the person, your child
Yeah.
or your family in that and be a human being, be vulnerable, be joyful, be silly, be whatever,
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
beautiful, be clear, but be
Yeah.
there for that situation. And that
Mm.
is a huge gift. And it's not easy, like if you live in one mode all the time and then to expect to just be somebody else when you come home, that
Mhm.
needs training or it needs dedication. So,
That's what I was thinking about as you were talking as well, is what it takes to change. It can take a lot to change. Even if we work with someone quickly or in a short space of time and we get that time with that person, or, if we work with them for a longer period of time, it still takes a lot for the change to happen. So I wonder, just going back to what we were talking about earlier, what makes it worth it? What makes it worth working on at the core? And
mm,
are the benefits that
mm.
outweigh the costs, so to speak, of doing this work?
Oh yes, that's many. Some of the things that let's say, like what I've heard from people is um, the most common one is like suddenly people feel a sense of relaxation and ease that they didn't even know was possible.
Mhm.
Because what falls away very often when you start doing the work, you understand what really drives you. So you understand what is a deep, real motivation, what you really wanting to work for, but you also understand what is like a disguised being driven by something that is not any more relevant, maybe, or you were trying to prove that to your parents or to your younger self or to somebody in the family, whatever you name it, and then not trying to achieve something that is not really relevant for now anymore is a huge relaxation. And often comes like people have shared with me so often that they feel super successful. Like you said, everything's going well, but deep inside they still feel like an imposture or a fraud or like not. It's like you can't enjoy the amazing life that you have. And that's sad.
Absolutely.
Like you have
Yeah.
an amazing life, you have amazing achievements,
Mm,
whatever, and there are challenges like in every life, but you
mm,
can't feel that from the inside. And
uh-huh.
people look back at the end of their lives, they don't look back on how it looked. They look back on how they were experiencing it. It's
Mhm.
unavoidable. So that suddenly becomes much more like not two stories, but like one story. This is my life, and I am I experiencing it like this. And that's a relief. It's a huge bonus also for again for relationships, for families. You suddenly feel much more real and much more possibility to be really close. There's not so much anymore that idea of like I have to perfect my image, this
Mhm.
relentless trying to keep it up, which builds stress, which builds everything. And it's like I can be just more real. And
Yeah,
people enjoy real people.
absolutely. And also, a lot of the fears that people have coming into this work, Gregor, when they actually do the work, or well, maybe we could call it something other than work, but when they look at their inner self,
When they go on the journey.
yeah, when they go on the journey, those fears that they had, fears of losing the positions that they're
Mm.
in, the stature they have, the recognition, the financial freedom that they have. It actually is the opposite of that when they go through it. So I wonder if you could also share a little bit about this, because you see this as
Yes,
as
yes. Yeah, no, that's very important, but because that fear comes up immediately, or not, or very often, or it's somewhere in the process. And actually, when that happens, like, okay, this is important now because you're
Mm,
touching something real.
Mhm.
And but I want to give a little premise first, like why I think in general this is just the edge of going forward in business and in leadership. Because um, I hear this from people all the time. When you're at a certain level of leadership in business, in whatever, and even as a parent, you're a leader. You're in a leadership position in some way. So this is everywhere in life. But what we don't understand, first of all, none of us has been really, really trained for that. Most people train a certain job, and suddenly you find yourself just talking to people every day, like from 8 to 8 in the evening, every day you have meetings. So you're in a relational experience all the time. But that's not what your studies prepared you for mostly. And then people go like,
Mm.
oh, how am I doing this? And you're dealing with relationships, with people, with issues, with meetings and dynamics in teams. So in my understanding, and it's again, it's supported by research and more understanding, leadership is a relational experience, is a relational skill. The other things most people already have in their belt, like they just know the business and everything, but they struggle with how am I doing with all these interpersonal dimensions, and how you're holding yourself, how you are with yourself affects more than just the words you use. Like who you are as a person comes across. We all know that. You immediately know, you see through, you know, you know if a person is really there or not there, and all these kind of things. And so, and then people get, like we said, like they get stressed, and they feel like, wow, what if I now become more soft, or more allow myself something more that I was always not allowing myself. And almost always I hear, wow, actually it got much more easier. The connections with people are more, they respect me more. There is more gravitas, there is more seniority in the room. Like you just become more of the leader you actually want to be.
Yeah.
And interestingly, sometimes there is this feeling that I found that astounding always when people said, like they're so diligent, they're so disciplined. And often people say, like, but if I don't have this like harsh driver in myself, maybe I would not do anything of that anymore. And I'm like,
Mm.
wow, that's really interesting. And again, it is not true. If this is really something you want to do, you will do it anyways. But there
Awesome.
might be things that you will do differently if you take out the harshness from the pressure you put yourself under. And you
Awesome.
might relate to yourself differently, and you might relate to your colleagues, to your employees, to your family differently, with more humanity in your way of being, and not in a demanding or pressuring way so much. But this, again, this we cannot solve cognitively, like
Yeah.
'cause these
Yeah.
patterns are stored not
Uh-huh.
just in your mind, like we intellectualize that, but these are deeper stored patterns, like they're kind of wired into our hardware. And that's when you
Awesome.
said, like, we need this kind of like deeper work,
Yeah.
um, which can be fun, by the way. It's not just like serious work,
Yeah, it
but
is.
it's interesting. It's like
Yeah.
just changing something wiring wise on the inside. So you look at life and yourself differently.
That actually brings me, when you said about cognitively, that brings me to just a little bit, if we could touch a little bit on AI.
Mm.
I think that AI can be a fascinating accompaniment to the work, but I also know that it's sometimes being used instead of doing the work.
Mm.
So I wonder if I could hear some of your opinion on AI, the pros and the cons, and
Yeah. Well, well, that's another huge topic. I can just share my thoughts right now. I think we're all like in the discovery phase of like, what is this? Really, and we're like
yeah.
playing around with it. So what my current thinking of this is it's nothing that we can compare to anything. It's not just another little technological revolution. I think it's a revolution in that and is already affecting our consciousness as human beings. So it's huge. And so we cannot control it, we cannot foresee it. So all our usual strategies also kind of like fall short here, which is a bit scary, but also great. It's like, okay, now we need to find another way how to approach this. I don't think AI suddenly will save humanity. We're just outsourcing this to another hope. And like, we need to take care of this ourselves. So it can be extremely helpful, and it can be like a low threshold kind of like entry point to also do this. I heard the other day the most used way for AI or chat bots like ChatGPT and so on is really like kind of like therapy related questions, which is like, it just shows us people want to talk about it, right? But they feel free to talk to the machine because there is less pressure, less expectation of being judged, valued, like the shame is reduced. So great, people have a need. It's great that you do that, but it cannot replicate the deep humanity, what we talked about before, because it's a pattern recognition at stellar levels, but it does not feel and empathize and really resonate. And when we go to that place, for me, there's a big, let's say there's maybe a great thing that AI can offer us as humans, which is not its skill. This is good, but maybe it can really point us to what makes us truly human. What no machine, no AI, no whatever, I don't know if that's the right word even, but let's say like no other thing can do for us. And that, like for us, it's the human heart, it's the human nervous system, the fullness of our experience that makes life, all those experiences that even if you describe that, they're not it. But you can have experiences when you experience them that they become so essential, so fulfilling, so real. That's when you look back at life and you go like, this was worth it. But that's not cognition, that's not understanding, that's not just thinking about something. This is still a certain abstraction, but the reality of the experience. I think in a kind of funny way, I think AI can make us more aware of that. So we focus on that while we can leave to the machine the thinking that it just does better.
Yeah.
But so we can be what we are here to do and to experience. So
Reminds me, actually, recently I had a couple of people come in who had talked about using AI, ChatGPT and Claude and so forth or using AI tools as a therapist, and happened to mention that they tried every which way possible and input many sort of PDFs and workbooks that they'd got. And although it was really helpful, they gained a lot of awareness, a lot of insight. But then the realization was they still needed another human to do the work at the end of the day.
right.
And so I think that getting to, like you mentioned, getting to that deeper physiological nervous system level and that consciousness can only be done through person to person.
Exactly, because I think you said something beautiful, like they gained a lot of awareness and a lot of insight, which are first steps of a process, but insight is not transformation, or transformation is not is not the same as having an insight. That's like deeper change and transformation where you really feel like something is different requires more. It's like it goes through all layers. Otherwise, like we're all smart, like everybody's read the books and like heard podcasts. I mean, information is out there. It's like it's everywhere. It's too much of it sometimes. But what is relevant for me, then that's kind of like an insight. But how that insight becomes a lived, embodied experience, that then holds under stress and under pressure. That's the real test. Oh, can I think about this? And it's nice. But then when I get back tomorrow, when my wife talks to me like this, when my employees want all of this, when all of this life comes on, is it still there? And when if it's still there, that's transformation. Or at least we know what we're practicing when we're had a deeper experience. And that's the change that, like, sometimes change can go like this because we were ready for it already, or
Uh-huh.
the right circumstances were happening. And I'm sure you know that also sometimes executives are over ready because they didn't know that they can go through that door. But once they go, like, wow, oh, wow.
Mm,
And a lot happens in quick
yeah.
time. And then there are changes that will take years and longer if we stick to it because they're the movements of our life. We cannot just
Mhm.
rush that. And actually, this is not needed.
Uh,
Life has its time, and that's beautiful.
yeah, excellent. Well said. Yeah. And I wonder for anyone listening who resonates and recognizes themselves in this, but doesn't quite feel ready or hasn't been able to take the action or the next step, what
Mm,
might you say to those people,
mm.
Gregor?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things, but if this resonates, it already means that something in you is longing for something else. And you don't need to know exactly what it is, but you can just take that kind of like longing, or can be like a nagging feeling, or you get inspired by somebody else that talks about an experience you go. So that's already something relevant. Like the deeper journeys often start from a little, I wonder, and then if you follow that, suddenly it becomes a much bigger unfolding. Um, and also if you have a moment and you think, so if I look back at from the end of my life, is what I'm doing right now what I would look back on and say, like, this is great. Do what you keep doing what you're doing. In other ways, it's like with the modern world, is it sustainable what you're doing right now and the way you're doing it? You know,
Mhm.
does it give you actually access to what you're thinking will happen one day? Because sometimes we postpone, like, but then if I then and then it will, like my kids then will love me in 10 years' time if I just sacrifice another 5 years. Maybe, maybe not. And so those are kind of like questions and ponderings and reflections you can do. But the most simple, I would say, if this has a resonance about the humanity we're talking here, check if you have one or two, ideally more, but at least one or two people that you can really share yourself with, uncensored, fully. Like, does somebody know what really moves you on your inside? Your concerns, your worries, your dreams, like, is somebody there that knows this
Beautifully
and that
said.
that you can share it with? And if not, that's something to maybe find and develop, because it's one of the greatest treasures if we can share ourselves, because through that we get to know ourselves. There are many things we all don't know about ourselves yet. And the easiest way to discover that is through the presence of somebody else. And through that, you will learn so much more about life. Like, life is just so, has like so much more to offer, and it's not against your success or your capacity to function in the world. That's just a story and a myth. It's not really true.
Thank you, Gregor. This was absolutely uplifting, and I really appreciate you taking
Mm,
the time to do this interview. Is
mm.
there anything else that you feel that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think it's just to underline all what we shared here, that it's just worth it, to um, go into the human journey, and to see where that entrance door to your inner world is. And there are many, 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 many guides out there. that can be a step, a guiding force on the journey for a while. And thank you, Galicio. I was really enjoying that conversation. Thank you for doing the work that you're offering and bringing this out there. I'm appreciating this a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If this conversation resonated with you, perhaps the invitation is not to become someone different, but to become more aware of the patterns, assumptions, and adaptations that may have quietly shaped how you lead, relate, and move through the world. You can learn more about Gregor's work at Integral Being. If you've enjoyed this episode of Home, please consider following the podcast and sharing it with someone who may find it valuable. Until next time, remember that meaningful change often begins with paying attention to what has been there all along. Welcome home.
Place when you slow it down. Throw off the rules like our shoes on the golden ground, and sway in the autumn breeze. You are beautiful when you look at me. Can you feel my